It began with a glint in the earth. A small shimmer that caught the morning light, half hidden beneath the roots of an old birch tree on the windswept coast of southwest Norway. At first glance, it could have been anything, a piece of metal, a bottle cap, a forgotten coin. But as the soil was brushed away, what emerged was far older, far more precious, and infinitely more mysterious. A golden pendant, curved and intricate, etched with symbols that hadn't been seen by human eyes for nearly 1,000 years. It was the first sign that a treasure, a true Viking hoard, lay waiting beneath the Norwegian soil. The discovery would ripple across the world. Archaeologists, historians, and everyday dreamers alike found themselves captivated by the story, not just because of what was found, but because of what it revealed about the people who once walked those lands. The Vikings, warriors, explorers, traders, poets, and dreamers, whose reach extended from the fjords of Scandinavia to the farthest edges of Europe and beyond. And yet, for all we know about their conquests and their ships, there are still mysteries buried in the earth, like whispers from the past, waiting to be uncovered. The story began quietly, in the autumn of 2024, when a local man named Ole Kristoffersen took his metal detector into a field near Stavanger, a region rich in Viking history. He wasn't looking for treasure, he was chasing the thrill of curiosity, the kind that only comes when you wonder what the earth might be hiding. He had walked that path dozens of times before, the hum of his detector blending with the sound of gulls and the rustling sea wind. But this time, the signal was different, sharp, strong, insistent. He knelt down, dug carefully, and what he found would soon be hailed as one of the most important Viking discoveries in decades. Piece by piece, the treasure revealed itself. Necklaces of twisted gold, silver arm rings heavy with age, brooches shaped like beasts and dragons, each crafted with a precision that spoke of both artistry and devotion. There were coins, too, Arabic dirhams from lands thousands of miles away, marked with strange script. Each artifact told a fragment of a larger story, a glimpse into a world of trade, faith, and fierce beauty. But even more fascinating than the objects themselves was the question, why had they been buried? And who had chosen to hide them here, at the edge of the North Sea? To understand that, we must go back, 1,000 years back, to a time when Norway was not yet a kingdom but a collection of fierce, proud clans. The Viking Age was nearing its twilight, and the old gods, Odin, Thor, and Freya, were slowly being replaced by the cross of Christianity. It was a time of great uncertainty, when loyalty and belief could shift overnight. A time when one man's fortune could vanish as quickly as the tide. Imagine, for a moment, that the treasure once belonged to a chieftain. A leader whose hall stood high above the fjord, where feasts were held under the light of torches and the echoes of song filled the air. His gold would have been a symbol of power, earned through raiding and trading, through years spent sailing across stormy seas to England, Ireland, even Byzantium. And yet, something, war, betrayal, the arrival of a new faith, may have forced him to hide his wealth beneath the earth. Perhaps he planned to return for it, but never did. Perhaps his name was forgotten, but his treasure remained, a silent witness to the passage of centuries. Archaeologists suggest that the hoard may have been buried sometime in the late 900s, during a turbulent transition in Norway's history. This was the era of King Harald Fairhair's descendants, when unification and conversion reshaped the land. The Vikings were not simply raiders by then, they were settlers, merchants, and craftsmen. The items in the hoard reflected this evolution, not the spoils of war, but the wealth of a people connected to a vast web of trade stretching from Scandinavia to the Middle East. The presence of Islamic silver, melted and reshaped into Norse designs, told a story of cultures intertwining across continents long before the modern age of globalization. As the news spread, experts began to reconstruct the world that had produced such treasure. They studied the metal composition, traced the origins of the coins, compared the designs to other hoards discovered in Scandinavia. Each clue painted a richer picture of Viking society, one that was not merely defined by violence or conquest, but by ambition, curiosity, and a relentless desire to explore. These were people who believed that the world was vast and full of wonder, and that fortune favored those brave enough to seek it. But there was something else about this discovery, something intangible. The way the gold glowed against the dark Norwegian soil seemed almost poetic, as if the earth itself had chosen this moment to speak. For centuries, these objects had lain hidden through storms, wars, and the march of progress. Empires had risen and fallen above them, and still they waited. Their silence was finally broken by a man with a simple machine and an unshakable sense of curiosity. It is, in many ways, a reminder that history is never truly gone. It sleeps, quietly, beneath our feet. When the items were brought to the Stavanger Archaeological Museum, they were cleaned, catalogued, and studied with reverence. Under bright lights, the details became clearer, the engravings of serpents coiling around brooches, the delicate filigree of gold wire, the faint hammer marks left by long-dead craftsmen. Some pieces bore traces of wear, suggesting they were not ceremonial, but lived with, worn by people who laughed, fought, and dreamed like we do. To touch them, even through gloves, was to bridge 1,000 years of time. What makes this story so captivating is not just the treasure itself, but what it tells us about our relationship with the past. The Vikings were not mythical beings, they were human. Their treasures were not just symbols of power, but of identity, memory, and hope. To bury such wealth was to trust the earth to keep it safe, perhaps for future generations. It was an act of both fear and faith. And in rediscovering it, we are reminded that every artifact, every coin, every carving, carries within it the echo of a human story. The modern world often sees history as distant, a sequence of dates, kings, and battles. But discoveries like this remind us that history is alive. The soil of Norway is not just dirt, it is a library of forgotten lives. Each excavation unearths not only objects but emotions, ambition, loss, reverence, and awe. When you stand in the field where Ole found that first pendant, you can almost feel it, the hum of something ancient just below the surface. The Hoard also reignited debate among historians. Was this treasure hidden in haste, during a raid or conflict? Or was it a ritual offering to the gods, buried to seek their favor in uncertain times? In Viking belief, gold was not merely wealth, it was imbued with spiritual meaning. To give it back to the earth was to speak directly to the divine. If the Hoard was such an offering, then it tells a story of devotion, of a people reaching out to forces greater than themselves in the face of change. The arrival of Christianity would have made such rituals dangerous, and perhaps that's why this one was never reclaimed. There's a strange beauty in that idea, that faith itself might be hidden in the soil, waiting for us to rediscover it. When archaeologists unearthed these objects, they were not just recovering gold, they were uncovering belief, identity, and transformation. The moment the first artifact saw sunlight again, it connected our modern world to an ancient one, reminding us that progress does not erase the past. It simply layers over it, waiting for curiosity to peel it back. Imagine the life of the craftsman who forged one of those brooches. He sits by a flickering fire, hammering metal into shape, each strike echoing in the cold night. Outside, snow falls softly on the fjord. Perhaps he thinks of the woman who will wear this piece, a noble woman, proud and fierce, whose lineage stretches across the sea. He cannot know that, 1,000 years later, his work will be found and admired by strangers speaking a language he's never heard. Yet through his art, he becomes immortal. Every line and curve of his design is a message across time. I was here. I created. I mattered. That, perhaps, is the real treasure. Not the gold or silver, but the connection. The way a handful of objects can make us feel close to people who lived a millennium ago. The Vikings sailed across oceans, but they also sailed across time, and each discovery pulls them a little closer to us. As the museum prepared to display the Hoard, visitors began to arrive from around the world. Children pressed their faces against the glass, eyes wide with wonder. Older Norwegians felt a quiet pride, a sense that their ancestors were speaking again. And in the hum of voices, you could hear something deeper, an understanding that history is not just about what was lost, but what endures. The Viking treasure of southwest Norway is more than an archaeological find, it is a reminder of human continuity. A bridge between the known and the unknown, the seen and the unseen. It invites us to look at our own lives and ask what we, too, are leaving behind for the future. What stories, what creations, what traces of ourselves will remain when time has washed everything else away? As night falls over the Norwegian coast, the wind carries the scent of salt and pine. Somewhere beneath that same earth, there are still secrets waiting, forgotten ships, buried swords, lost songs of love and war. And maybe, just maybe, someone like Ole will find them one day. Someone who looks at a simple piece of land and dares to wonder what lies beneath. Because in the end, history is not a book already written, it's a living conversation between the past and the present. Every discovery adds a new sentence, a new breath. The Viking treasure of Norway is one of those moments, a sentence written in gold, unearthed by chance, and read by the world. And so the story continues, carried not by the clang of swords or the roar of longships, but by the quiet sound of a man's shovel meeting the soil, and the timeless truth that no matter how much time passes, the past is never truly buried. It waits, patiently, beneath the surface of our world, shimmering, eternal, and alive.